Hello and welcome to this Excel tutorial. In this tutorial, we will build a project plan like the one you can see in the background. For doing so, we will use conditional formatting and we will extensively use the if clause to determine what comes into certain cells. So let's start with a blank workbook. As conditional formatting is a lot around the design of an Excel spreadsheet, let's start by coloring the whole background in light gray by adding some side to it, adding a title, making this title a bit larger. And then for this project plan, we want to capture the tasks, want to capture the start dates, the end dates, and the progress. And then on the right, we want to plot this in a kind of a Gantt chart. The way I want to go about this is by entering a start date. So let's say the first date is the 1st of May. To make it clear that this is a cell for data entry, I'm going to change the color, and I'm also centering the whole thing. Of course, the task will be a bit of a longer text. I'd like to have a little distance here. And here in the field, I would like to start with the first date. So I'm referencing to the date that was entered. And then, as I would like to have a weekly separation, I'm gonna copy this cell and add 7 days to it. This can then be copied over. Before I do so, however, as this is much too broad, I would like to change the text and rotate it upward. This way, it's going to be more narrow and easier to see. Now I'm selecting the little dot there down in the corner, and I'm drawing to the right to get some dates. I'm selecting those columns, and as said before, I'm going to make this much narrower so that we're seeing the dates. Now, as this is a title row, I'm going to change the color. Let's say to a blue. I'm going to make the text bold, change the text color to white. Now I'm starting to add the tasks. So I have the task 1, I have some subtasks. And to make it visible that that is data points that I would like someone to enter, I'm again changing the background to make it stick out so that it is obvious for everyone that that's fields that need to be manually entered. I'm gonna make an indent so that the subtask is clearly linked to the first task, and I'm drawing this down So you see Excel automatically numbers this one up. I could also make the task in bold. I then add start date. So let's say the first task will start on the 10th. Let's assume this task will take 14 days, 2 weeks. I'm gonna reference this to the starting date. I'm saying this cell is equal to the starting day plus 14 days of duration. Alternatively, I could also enter an additional cell where I can enter the duration of the task and let it be calculated automatically. Now for the subtask 2, I'm assuming that this task can only start once the first task has ended. So I'm going to link this by saying the start date is the end date of the previous task. And again, assuming this task might take 3 weeks, I'm entering 21 days. Now the third task might be a task that goes in parallel with subtask 1, but also starts after task with task 2, but starts after task 1. So starts on the same date. And here I'm assuming that this might take just 3 weeks, or let's make it a long task. That takes 50 days. Subtask 4 starts when this one is done. Let's make it a 2-week task. Now for the complete task, I can say the start date is the start date of the first subtask and the end date is the end date of the last subtask. Now as a progress, my standard entry will be 0%. And again, I'm just drawing this down, I can copy it. Now we start with the first conditional formatting. And I'm formatting this to be represented by data bars. I'm taking green bars. Let's see whether that worked. So I'm entering 100% here. I'm entering 50% here and 20% here. Works fine. Problem is, as soon as I reduce this to 70%, all of a sudden this is 100% and the 50% is no longer there. 50% might be represented as the whole, and that's not what I intended. This is why I left those 2 lines free, where I can enter the minimum value and the maximum value that I expect in those cells. And if I now go to conditional formatting and manage the rules, I can change the first cell instead of E8 to E6 to include this maximal and minimal value. And now, no matter what's in there, I will get a correct representation. I can then also go and just hide those 2 so that I'm not bothered with those values that I actually only use for the formatting. Now let's start with the Gantt chart. Here, I would like to enter an X whenever a task is actually ongoing. So when the task has started, say this cell, if the starting date, so C8, is smaller than the next date, so not the date here, but the date in the next row. I want to enter an X into the cell. And if that's not the case, I'm going to leave the cell blank. I'm closing the if statement with another bracket. So I'm having the condition as the first entry. The second entry is what happens if the condition is met. And the third one is the value that's going to be in the cell if the condition is not met. Let's hit return and see what happens. It's empty. What I would have expected. Now, if I want to drag this over to the right, funny things start to happen. And this is because the value wasn't fixed. If, for example, I'm choosing this cell here, I'm seeing that all of a sudden I'm comparing this cell here to this one. Now, in order to fix this, I need to fix some of those values. So for this C8 value here, I don't want this to move right when I'm drawing this right. So it should still be the C. So what I need to do is add a $sign in front of the C. That will make the C stay fixed. Now when I'm drawing this down, I don't want this one here to move downwards. So in this case, the H will change in every row, but I will change this by fixing number 4. Alternatively, I can also hit the F4 key, and this will toggle through the different options I have. Fix both, fix one of them, either row or column, or fix none. Now with this change, drawing this over here will give me a result that is more like what I had expected. What I also see is that the last column here is actually referring to this one here. So I have to, again, hide this column because this column does not make sense. Now that marks the start date, but I also have to add a condition for the end date. So if the task is finished or should have finished, then no more X's should be entered. So let's see where to add this. So the first if clause stays, and instead of the X, I'm going to enter a new if statement. So I'm going to add and this time I'm going to check for the end date. So I'm going to check for D8. And if D8 is larger than the date before, then in this case, it's going to be the X. And if this is not the case, it should again be an empty value. I'm going to end this if clause with a closed bracket. So again, I've got the statement or the question, the entrance if this condition is met, and the entry if it's not met. And once again, I need to fix those. So with a $sign for the D to fix it in the horizontal axis, and $sign in front of the 4 to fix this on the vertical one. Let's try this. See what happens. Pull this down. And this already looks quite like a Gantt chart. However, I would like to add some more bells and whistles to this. So for example, I would like to know if the task has actually progressed to 100%. So if the task has progressed to 100%, instead of the X, I would like to state that this task is now done. So again, instead of just having an X everywhere, I'm going to exchange this X again with an if clause. So if the progress is smaller than 1, that's equal to 100%, then it's an X. But if it's if the progress is 100%, then instead of an X, I say, okay, now it's finished. And again, I need to close my if statement with another bracket. So you see those if statements are one inside the other. Every if statement, however, has always those three parts. And again, for this E8, I need to fix it. So I need to add a $sign in front of my E. Let's see how it works. And actually, I just entered this into the wrong cell. So let's move this one over and then move it from there all the way down here and down here. And we realize it worked. Those where it's 100% are represented now by an F. Quickly checking whether this works for this as well. And it does. So I'm happy. Not yet 100%, because I also want to be notified if a task is overdue. So if this here is not yet finished, and again, I'm going to replace my X with an if statement. And if my end date that I have here, the D8, is actually smaller than today, and then this is a function which requires the brackets, then my task is overdue. So I'm adding an O for this. Once again, I need to close the if statement with a bracket. And again, I need to fix the cell, in this case D8, with $, so that it doesn't move when I'm drawing it horizontally. So let's see what that changed. Not a lot. However, if I change this here to 50%, now this is, and to let you check this, today is the 11th. So this one is after the 11th. So that's correct. If here I would have just entered 14 days, you will see that now this is overdue as well. Because now the 7th, the end date, is now also past today. I'm going to clear that one again. And now comes another case for conditional formatting. So for all those cells, I'm going to add a new rule. So the new rule is for cells that contain a certain value. And that value is equal to X. Now for all those cases, my font should have a blue color because I want to have the filling of the cell also in blue. And like that, the font will have the same color as the background and you won't see the X's any longer. If I say apply, see, it worked. All my X's were replaced in a way. They're still there, but you can't see them, and they're replaced by those bars. I'm adding another rule. So the new rule is the same as above. So, but this time for all cells and tasks that are finished, I'm going to change my fill style to green, my font as well. It should yield a green bar. And the last thing is for the O's. I'm going to add a new rule, cells that contain a value equal to overdue. The format of those cells should warn me with a bright orange. So that's there. Now what I want to do as well, I want to show where I'm actually at with today's date. I'm choosing those cells again and then adding another conditional formatting. I'm adding a new rule. And this time I'm going to use a formula to determine which cells to format. So for those cells where the value is smaller than today, and here I wanted to move in that direction. I don't want to move the 4, so I need to remove the $sign in front of the G. And those cells I want to format with a white background. Let's see how that worked. Actually, it's the other way around. And I also see another flaw, because now this white actually replaces what I did before. The way to fix this is by going into Manage Rules. So first of all, I don't want this to be executed prior to. So first I'm going to change this to a larger to today. And the next thing I want to do is I want to move this down with those arrows, because then those here are do get the priority. And if I apply it now, I get the design I desired. Those dates that are past are marked in gray, and the time that I still have for my project is represented in white. I hope that this little tutorial was helpful for you. If you've got questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. And I hope to see you soon for another tutorial. Bye.